We will call the Sherburne County Board of Commissioners June 7th, 2022 meeting to order, and we will begin with a moment of silence and Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve our regular meeting proposed agenda?
I'll move approval.
Madam Chair, I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve our regular meeting proposed agenda.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
if I may, real quick, just a note for the record that Commissioner Schmiesing is remote via interactive television, so you can see and hear him and he can see and hear you, but there is a requirement that we do a roll call vote for all those items. And then jumping ahead just real quick on the consent agenda, just a note for the board, item 2.7, you did receive an updated agreement for the Elk River School District.
Okay. With those comments, we can go ahead with the vote.
To approve the agenda as presented, Commissioner Dolan,
Aye.
Commissioner Danielowski,
Aye.
Commissioner Phobie,
Aye.
Commissioner Schmiesing,
Aye.
Commissioner Brandt.
Aye.
Passes 5-0.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll move on to the consent agenda. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve that?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Go ahead with them.
On the motion for approving the consent agenda, Commissioner Dolan,
Aye.
Commissioner Danielowski,
Aye.
Commissioner Phobie,
Aye.
Commissioner Schmiesing,
Aye.
and Commissioner Brandt.
Aye. The motion's been made and passed. Thank you. Now we can move on to announcements.
Just a few brief announcements for the county board. Reminder that Monday on the 13th is the AMC District 5 meeting in Buffalo, hosted by Wright County. It starts at 8 a.m. I am interested in knowing how many commissioners plan on attending so we can post. I know Commissioner Schmiesing is chair of District 5, so he'll be there. Commissioner Phobie, Commissioner Danielowski. Okay, so we'll post for that. Thank you. And then also a note that on the 14th of June, so next Tuesday at 3 p.m., we do have the County Board of Appeal and Equalization. The 3 seated members who have been trained are the County Auditor Treasurer, Commissioners Brandt and Commissioners Danielowski, and I understand all 3 of you will be present. Great. And then since we will be having a legislative update from Micah, I'll forego my comments. I just would like to note, since it has been shared with staff, a thanks to Commissioner Dolan for his sharing of information and letting staff know of the situation. We really appreciate you being willing to lead us through this time, but also we're really, really glad that you're sitting here 3 weeks later.
Still above dirt.
Okay. Now we can move on to open forum. Do we have anyone signed up?
Yes, Madam Chair, we have 3 people signed up.
Okay.
Do you want me to go over the?
Yeah, go over them.
The purpose of the open forum section of the county board meeting is to allow the public input and/or information to be presented to the board that does not require action by the board. Personal attacks of any kind against another person, commissioner, or employee are not allowed. Campaign-type presentations are also not allowed. The time limit is 3 minutes per speaker with a maximum of 5 speakers per open forum. The time limit may be shortened or extended at the discretion of the board chair. Discussions that require additional time beyond the original 15 minutes will be recessed and continued following the conclusion of the regular board business meeting agenda items. All input or information is to be addressed to the Board of Commissioners and not to members of the audience. Handouts are public information. The county may make copies of such handouts for the public if needed, and the county board chair will ensure that open meeting forum policy is followed.
Okay, we have a limit of 15 minutes, and we need to adhere to that because of our agenda, so that we can go ahead and start with our first person.
Madam Chair, our first person is Kari Watkins of St. Cloud to talk about the election machines.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. My name is Kari Watkins, and I reside in Haven Township. I come before you this morning to bring you a report from CISA regarding one of the Dominion voting machines that they have found to have vulnerabilities to hacking. In fact, they found 9 vulnerabilities within the machine. This may not be the exact machine that is used in Sherburne County, but that does not mean the machines that are used in Sherburne County are safe and not hackable. We cannot be sure they are safe and not hackable because they were not tested in the same, as the report points out. The report acknowledges the research of Alex J. Halderman, University of Michigan, computer scientist and electronic voting expert. I have quoted Halderman before and will also include for you an Associated Press article from May 31st, 2022, in which he says, there are systematic problems with the way election equipment is developed, tested, and certified, and I think it's more likely than not that serious problems will be found in equipment from other vendors if they are subjected to the same kind of testing. That's the end of his quote, but in the past he's also said all machines have problems. So my request is to please remove the machines and use hand-counted paper ballots. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Our next person.
Next, we have Terry Dickinson of Big Lake speaking on election machine and data requests.
Good morning.
Good morning. So I want to read to you the Dominion Voting Systems Democracy Suite 5.5C. The EAC certification, the actual certificate says this certificate is not an endorsement of the product by any agency of the U.S. government, and no warranty of the product is either expressed or implied. In the scope of certification in the EAC document, the certification that we have, it says the EAC certification is not an endorsement of a manufacturer, voting system, or of any of the system's components. The EAC certification is not a federal warranty of the voting system or any of its components. The EAC certification is not a determination that the voting system, when fielded, will be operated in a manner that meets the HAVA requirements. The EAC certification is not a determination that the system is ready for use in an election. The EAC certification is not a determination that any particular component of a certified system is itself certified for use outside the certified configuration. So I want to go over some data requests that we have made that have been yet unfulfilled. So on April 25th, Diane requested the cast vote record, the CVR request. At your earliest convenience, we would like the raw data file versus the summary information. We would like this file in electronic format. That was April 25th. On April 26th, Tim Sine of the County Attorney's Office was involved, and he said, are you referring to the abstract votes cast for Sherburne County? So on April 27th, I replied to him, Mr. Symes, the abstract is the final report that the election judges fill out. We want the CVR report that details how each ballot is interpreted. We are looking for the certificates and the actual forms that were filled out during the public acts process of the post-election review, and we are looking for documentation of how those results were communicated to the Secretary of State's office. Thank you for your time and attention to this most important issue. We look forward to receiving the digital documents quickly. On Wednesday, April 27th, Mr. Symes replied, there is no document called the cast vote record that county election officials prepare. There's an abstract of votes cast, and there is a post-election review summary. So he wants to know if we want that again. So we clarified again on April 27th, Mr. Symes, Rick can be at Sherburne County Government Center at 1:30 p.m. on Thursday, April 28th to show you how to access your files. This will make it much easier for everyone. The information is important, and we citizens have a right to
And
see
Ms. Dickin,
our
your time
tax
is up.
dollars. Okay.
Thank you.
Still not
Thank you.
submitted to us. It's been.
Thank you for your,
Next, we have Dean Dieterman of Elk River speaking regarding the last meeting.
Morning.
Morning.
At the last meeting, May 17th, 2022, the Auditor Treasury Department gave a report on the Dominion machines. It's mind-boggling all the steps they went through to try to make the machines safe and accurate. I don't trust their efforts. For example, an app was put on my computer for a county project. It didn't work. I called the person in charge. He tried to talk me through the steps to get it to work for me. Finally, he started telling me what to push, and an amazing thing happened. He took over my computer while I sat and watched at my kitchen table. He reinstalled the app and fixed everything. Another example of new technology, my daughter went to church, turned off her cell phone. When she got home, she realized that her phone was missing. Her husband turned on her phone using his phone. They located it in the church parking lot under the snow. This makes me think that the voting machines cannot be trusted even if they have been shut off. The internet. My conclusion is that the electronic machines can easily be hacked. Also, there was a talk about an award project. I've never seen an award system that didn't cause division in people. I don't need an award for what I do in my free time or how I choose to spend my money. I believe that the county has more important things to do. Third, a group complained about the illegals in our county jail, saying they shouldn't be there. Yes, they should have been apprehended at the border, but they weren't. This is the cost of having open borders. Thank you.
okay. Thank you for sharing. We have
There's
no one
nobody else signed
Okay.
up.
So now we can close open forum and move on to item number 9. And we'll recess our regular meeting and open Community Health Board meeting. And we'll begin with approval of Community Health Board meeting agenda. So we have,
I'll move approval.
motion's been made to approve. Is there a second? Motion's been made and seconded to approve the Community Health Board's meeting agenda, and then we will begin with,
Commissioner Dolan,
Aye.
Commissioner Danielowski,
Aye.
Commissioner Phobie,
Aye.
Commissioner Schmiesing,
Aye.
Commissioner Brandt.
aye.
Passes 5-0.
Okay, so now we can move on to item number 9.2, which is to review and approve the Community Health Board meeting minutes from May 17th. Would anyone like to make a motion?
Madam Chair, I'll move the meeting minutes from May 17th, 2022.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motions been made and seconded to approve the Community Health Board meeting minutes from May 17th.
Commissioner Dolan,
Aye.
Commissioner Danielowski,
Aye.
Commissioner Phobie,
Aye.
Commissioner Schmiesing,
Aye.
Commissioner Brandt.
Aye.
Passes 5-0.
Okay, so now we'll move on to item 9.3, which is to consider approval of the 2022 Central Minnesota Alliance Community Health Improvement Plan, and we have Nicole here.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Just back today, on May 17th, Peggy Sammons, our Public Health Planner, presented our Community Health Improvement Plan. And so really just back today for formal approval to move forward with that plan as a 3-county and Central Care collaborative. Again, those priorities are still building families and mental well-being. And then we're working on some root causes as our strategy, focusing on data, structural racism, and community power. the strengths of lived experiences, values, and cultures of our communities, and the historical context.
Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the 2022 Central Minnesota Alliance Community Health Improvement Plan?
I will move approval.
Motion's been made. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Motion's been made and seconded to approve the Central Minnesota Alliance Community Health Improvement Plan effective July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2025. You go ahead with votes.
Seeing no discussion,
Oh, sorry, yeah. Is there any discussion?
with no discussion, Commissioner Dolan,
Aye.
Commissioner Danielowski,
Aye.
Commissioner Phobie,
Aye.
Commissioner Schmiesing,
Aye.
Commissioner Brandt.
Aye.
Passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, now we can close the Community Health Board meeting and reconvene our regular meeting and go on to 6.1 rather. Receive an update from the Minnesota Inter-County Association, which is MICA. And we have Matt Massman with us to begin.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Matt Mossman, Executive Director of the Minnesota Inter-County Association. I'm thinking that, just let me make sure I know how this works. Excellent. So appreciate the opportunity to be on your agenda today. We really, frankly, enjoy getting out of the office and out of St. Paul. And for me, I actually live in North Minneapolis, so it's a nice, easy drive up here to Elk River and to see you all in person. Take your questions after, as we go through the presentation, and also get your thoughts on what you think our priorities should be, either here or subsequent to the meeting. I want to just really give my appreciation at the front end, not only for Sherburne's participation and membership in MICA, but to Commissioner Phobie and Commissioner Schmiesing for their service to the MICA Board of Directors, and particularly Commissioner Schmiesing, thank you so much for your many years of service to MICA's executive leadership and overall direction and leadership for many years. So really appreciate that. We would have liked, and frankly, we're poised. We had a lot of great conversations, I think, and a good strategic approach and message for many things. As you all know, counties are a critical partner to state government in so many areas of public service and public infrastructure. And we really had some significant opportunities to move the ball forward in quite a number of areas that were poised for inclusion in supplemental bills, the bonding bill. And the reality is, as we've all read in the newspapers, that things just didn't come to pass. And so a lot was left undone as the legislature came to an end. So our presentation today is going to highlight for you the things that did happen during legislative session, but also give some update on what was either in tentative conference committee reports or under discussion, so that you can have a sense of sort of what was really realistically possible to be achieved for counties this session, and potentially still could if there's a special session, although I can't stand before you this morning with a ton of optimism in that regard. So that conversation is still playing out. Recapping, we headed into the legislative session, we being the state of Minnesota, with a historic $9.3 billion surplus. I say plus on top of that because the state also had $1.2 billion of federal ARPA money that had not yet been allocated, and a $6 billion surplus that was ongoing. And in addition to that, or incorporated into that, flush state budget reserves. So if you look down at the bottom of this page, that meant that the legislature had $9.3 billion to allocate in general fund monies if they chose to at the end for the biennium that ends June 30th, 2023, and then $6 million, which would be $3 million a year roughly, if they wanted to support ongoing or permanent changes to the state budget, whether that be tax relief or spending. Obviously, the state does have a biennial budget, so this not being that was passed last year, So we're not facing a situation where anything shuts down at the end of June or anything like that. We do have the state does have a biennial budget in place. So what did that look like? Okay, let's see. Am I not pointing in the correct direction now? How do I move forward one slide?
Can you help Matt out?
I think I need, somehow the clicker is. There we go. So just at a high level, the governor and leaders on May 17th agreed to a framework for an overall, so there were bipartisan conversations to give direction to the legislative session on May 17th. Conference committees were unsuccessful in resolving their differences in some really key areas: K-12 education, human services, public safety, transportation, housing. There were tentative agreements reached but not passed related to tax cuts and property tax relief, environment and energy, jobs and workforce programs, higher education and state agency appropriations. Of course, the whole point of a global framework is that there's an expectation when the two sides come together that all of that be part of the package before it all passes. The standalone bills, there are some standalone bills that did pass. Drought relief and ag funding that included broadband funding, which has been a key priority for counties. There was a separate mental health funding package Nancy will talk about. Earlier in session, there was restoration of the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund. $2.7 billion went into that. $500 million one time was set aside for frontline worker payments. Some of those classes of employees will potentially, or will be state, county employees, I should say, that would qualify for that. That will be administered exclusively by the state, not by county governments. So individuals will be able to start applying in the next week to 2 weeks. Here is the expectation that the state will soon be rolling out the application process for that. And of course, one of the first bills that passed in session was the extension of the COVID workers' compensation presumption that's now extends to January 13th of 2023 for public employees and private sector employees in the healthcare industry and frontline worker categories. So what did pass? I'm just going to talk about a couple things in tax and fiscal policy, and then turn it over to invite Steve and Nancy up to talk about their areas of expertise, and then I'll come back at the end and wrap it up. Broadband was $50 million, $25 million in this year, $25 million next year from the state general fund, plus $60.7 million of the remaining $110 million of federal IIJ capital projects money will be directed to state grants. And there's an additional $100 million that should be coming into the state broadband grant program from the IIJA, so the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, so two different federal acts there. So the long and short of it is this is the most amount of money that will be flowing into completing the state's promise of border-to-border broadband access that there has been that there's ever been. But there's also some policy changes that came along with that. There's a line extension program that was put in place so that if you're in an area where high-speed internet goes through, but you specifically as a property owner or business owner for whatever reason didn't get access to that line, you can apply, and there's a $25,000 per property grant to extend service for some of those hard-to-reach areas that are in areas that are ostensibly served, but a specific property here and there are not served. There's also a $30 million of money that is intended to be allocated at a 75% match rate. So right now, the maximum match rate in the state grant program is 50%, up to 50% of the costs. There's a new program that will the Department of Employment and Economic Development is asked to roll out in less densely populated parts of the state where that grant could go up to 75%. So there's a real effort both on the policy side, some changes in egress easement law to make it more accessible. What didn't happen was a lot of things that, I think the work that we did with partners, where a county message got through in a number of really key areas that were in the tax bill. Again, a tentative agreement, but not overall package didn't happen. So $30 million in increased county program aid per year. It would have been about $574,000 for Sherburne County. $9.2 million annually in PILT payments. That's mostly northern Minnesota counties, but every county does get some PILT funding. $6 million for soil and water conservation districts, so not directly county government, but certainly important work that gets done across the state by those jurisdictions. $30 million in general property tax relief. There was going to be increased money for direct relief, recognizing the increase in valuations and the concern about what that might mean for property tax burdens and shifting burdens for homeowners and renters. So there was $175 million total annually for renter, homeowner, and targeted refund relief. There was an expanded homestead market value exclusion. There was an expansion to the senior deferral program. And importantly, because we were facing this during part of the conversation, as the bill was going through the Senate, there were no levy limits and no limited market value, which is something that counties have been strongly opposed to in the past and was under consideration. All in all, I will also just comment here, and I have it on a slide at the end. Obviously, the other really significant priority for MICA and counties was working on reforms and increased funding for the Community Corrections Act and Community Probation Officer. That could have been, depending upon the formula, close to $1 million a year. For Sherburne County, there was significant funding increase in both the House and Senate Public Safety and Corrections bill. There was a lot of issues in dispute around funding in that bill that were sort of beyond community corrections. Community corrections was not necessarily the central lightning rod of that bill, but at any rate, that was another bill that did not reach a consensus. So I will turn it over to Steve to talk about transportation, and then Nancy will say a few words on human services, and I'll wrap up briefly.
Good morning.
Morning.
It's always good to be in Sherburne County, so good morning to all. Transportation is the part of the organization that I work on, and I had hoped to be here today telling you we had a record year. And that's what would have happened if they had just voted on the bills that had been negotiated during the course of the session. But as we all know by now, that did not happen. I think you need to know that it was functioning like a normal legislative session in the transportation area, starting out in early February. We had significant numbers of bills, significant numbers of one-on-one meetings with legislators that were key to resolving transportation issues. We had general agreement on some of our major platform planks, but there were major divisions between the two houses on their approach to transportation. I'll just highlight a few. The House was really focused on transit, various types of trains, traffic safety, and electric car infrastructure, while the Senate was really focused on roads and bridges, reforming the DMV system, the so-called King Report. They wanted no trains, and they wanted to raise fees on electric cars. So there were these differences right from the get-go. The focal point of the whole thing in the beginning, and it ended up being the focal point at the end, and it was a big part of the reason why nothing happened in the end, was how to distribute the money from the new source of revenue, the expanded, relatively new source of revenue, which is the sales tax on auto parts. And the Senate believed that 100% of it should go to roads and bridges. The House wanted a portion of that to go to transit, since this would be permanent ongoing funding, hundreds of millions of dollars. And in the end, they went from 60-40 down to 80-20. The Senate never moved from 100%. And so there were other factors, but that was the major factor policy-wise in terms of why we had the problems we did. So let me just focus on the two major bills that affect transportation and let you know how close we came. But we're here to report, as of today, no real progress. The irony was at the beginning, as the session worked on and we got to the final discussions on the big supplemental appropriation bills, transportation was merged with four other entities, which was somewhat unique and I don't think all that helpful, but that's the way it was. But unlike past years, the leadership allocated significant money to transportation, $360 million in fiscal year 22-23, and an additional $486 million for 24-25. So between that and bonding, which I'll speak to in a moment, three of the four major priorities for MICA and transportation, which was to provide the match money for the IIJA, the federal program that had passed the previous year, significant new money for local county roads and bridges. Those were all in place to happen. We were positioned just the way you'd want to be for the final 10 days of the session, but it didn't happen. I think without casting blame one place or the other, I would pin it on partisan politics reaching sort of a zenith of development in the last 30 years and coming down to this session. It became a real roadblock to progress, and it's really unfortunate for everybody, but that's the way it was. In addition, in the Senate bill, they had pushed and been somewhat successful the last couple of years in earmarking road and bridge projects. Sherburne County had one within the 22 that were listed. Frankly, 14 of the 22 were in MICA counties, so we were all kind of interested to see how that negotiation was going to turn out. And whether there's a special session in the next few months or the citizens of the state deliver whoever they do to the legislature next year, I expect we eventually will get a resolution to that and all these other questions. But timing is important. The fact we're not getting this done now does pose some possible major roadblocks, and it could lead to Minnesota losing some significant transportation money in terms of the big infrastructure bill that passed last year. We had over $5 billion coming to Minnesota over the next 5 years for roads and bridges. But as I think you all know by now, all of these different federal components of cash coming into the state have to be matched at about a 20% level. And the bill, as was in front of them, had the match completed. And that was significant. In the bonding area, visiting regularly with Senator Bach and Representative Fu Lee, the two chairs. Our platform, the original Senate bill was at $200 million for county bridges, $200 million for county roads, which would have been an all-time high watermark. By the time these negotiations got to the final few days, talking to Bach, I think it was going to settle in at $75 million for each component. That also would have been a record. So, you know, we had within our grasp really a significant transportation program between the bonding bill and the supplemental budget bill. And it's very frustrating not to be able to tell you it got done. The final issue I'll mention, which was wrapped up inside both these bills, kind of floated around from place to place, was an issue we've worked on relatively successfully the last 5, 6, 7 years, which is the local road wetland mitigation program that I think you're all familiar with. If that doesn't stay funded at a certain level in any given year, your spring construction can be at risk. That's a relationship you have with your local contractors. Fixes a lot of roads and bridges in your county. We were looking to do two things: structurally reform the budget aspect of it so that it became a regular part of Bowser's budget, which would have provided a lot of security to it over the future years. It's been a good program for 30 years. The ask was $20 million, $14 million in bonds, so thereby your bonding bill, $6 million in cash, probably also ultimately housed in the bonding bill. In the end, it found a placeholder inside the environment bill, but every conversation we had with Senator Ingebrigtsen and others who were the key players here were assuring us that they were going to get this thing solved, and I think it would have happened in the final bonding bill, which literally was being negotiated right up until the end, but could have closed if the other things had closed. So without getting deeper in the weeds, it was a great session for transportation up until the final few days. And it's there to happen if they have a special session. And that's what we still have to hope for. You know, keeping track of all the rumors is almost full-time work these days, but that's where it sits. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. Oh, one last thing I want to say is, Andrew Witter, your engineer, I know you know how good he is, but we have an engineers committee that meets throughout the year. He's an active participant in that. We value his judgment, and of course, the statewide engineers do also, and he's been a leader in that group, and so it's been a pleasure to work with him. I've known him quite a few years back to his Anoka County days, and I'm glad you have him in Sherburne County. I know he's doing a good job for you.
We're glad we have him too. We do have one question here.
So just a comment, and you, I know, are fully aware of this, Steve. Thanks for your report. Thanks for being here, Micah. Just following our last board meeting, so 3 weeks ago, was it? We found ourselves out in Washington, D.C., so trying to advocate for a few projects that you're very well aware of. And it just, the whole, one of the members of the delegation did mention, you know, if the state would just give you the money or operate and come together and do what they're supposed to do with the money we gave them on a federal transportation level, so much would get funded in our state. So really puts us all, as you very well know, in a precarious position, even going out to Washington to ask for money when they've given, and there's such an opportunity right sitting in front of us. So it was interesting and challenging a bit. We had a great visit overall, but really wish it was different, obviously, for our own personal projects, obviously, but for the state in general.
Well, it's kind of hard to keep track of the multiple ironies in this subject area, but I think I mentioned, but I'll be very specific. Right up front in the negotiations on the transportation aspect of the conference committee, there was bipartisan agreement that they would have roughly $40 million and more in that package, which would have created it was designated for those matches. So it's
Been here before. We always start the session with, we're gonna be done early. And then we go to, we're gonna get it done on time. Then we go to, there'll be no special session. And how many sessions have we had in the last few years? It will be, if we don't have a special session, that would probably be less likely than having one. How many special sessions have we had? So what's special about them, I guess, but I'm curious about that.
8 of the last 10 years, so.
So they aren't very special. Hopefully they'll come together and figure something out here. They've done that before. It seems like a very difficult way to do business, but I think there's reason for us to have hope. Thank you.
Madam
Go
Chair.
ahead.
And I agree with what Commissioner Smeezing is saying, and I think it is probably good that people speak out and reach out to their representatives to basically impress upon them, because ultimately, who pays the price for this is the residents of the state of Minnesota, the residents here in Sherburne County, the taxpayers, because this has to do with roads, transportation, and safe bridges, and it's important. Everybody relies on those things. So hopefully people will reach out and hopefully something will happen as versus nothing happening.
Well, thank you. I hope that we will see a special session on this issue, because I think, as you can tell, we're all very concerned about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I'm Nancy Selesky, and I do Public Health and Human Services, and it's a pleasure to be in Sherburne County this morning. Yes, because there was a record surplus, expectations were so high, and, no exception in Health and Human Services. They were not able to come up with a budget bill that everyone could agree to, but they did put some money into a mental health bill, which was a standalone bill. Just before midnight on that very last night of session, Sunday, May 23rd, they did pass this $93 million mental health bill that did include, again, a number of county priorities. One of the priorities was additional investment in the Adult Mental Health Initiative grants of $20 million a year starting in the next biennium. And that was in response to a DHS proposal for reforming AMHI, where they were going to take the existing pot of money and distribute it amongst more of these projects. And so it was basically robbing Peter to pay Paul. So we didn't want to see the existing initiatives harmed, and so everyone was lobbying for additional money. So they did put additional money into that, and with that, all of the existing initiatives are held harmless. They also put $4 million into a $4 million increase to the base and mobile crisis grants. And another one that was included in this bill was competency restoration. They did create a board that's kind of akin to the guardian ad litem board within the judicial branch, and they're funding that with $22 million in the next biennium, which will fund and oversee forensic navigators. And their duties include coordinating mental health services to criminal defendants who are deemed incompetent to stand trial. This was a huge victory for us in terms of getting this new board, because at one time they were looking at counties to provide the forensic navigator services. So we were pleased with that outcome. A couple of other things I would just note is they put some money into school-linked mental health, behavioral health grants, shelter-linked youth mental health grants. They are also creating a mental health urgency room pilot program. The governor did sign that bill last week. He's going to have a ceremonial signing later this week. A couple of other just standalone bills that I would mention was a bill that related to the opioid state settlement litigation. And basically it provided a framework for distributing the nearly $300 million that Minnesota is getting out of this settlement from the opioid manufacturers. As you know, counties and cities, local governments are getting 75% of that settlement, which is about $222 million. And then the other 25% then is going through DHS for opioid education and prevention programs. The legislation does require that municipalities that receive these direct appropriations report annually to DHS on how the payments are being used. Another bill that passed early in session on a very unusual bipartisan and bicameral way was funding for ALS. They put $25 million in total into ALS for both research as well as money for caregivers. And this was largely in response to a much-loved Senator David Tomassoni, who was afflicted with this disease last year. And they did pass that bill with almost unanimous support early in the session. Also, one other thing I would mention on the last night of session is they did put together an HHS policy-only bill, so again, no funding. I'll just highlight a couple of the things to give you a sample of that. They did expand the scope of mental health data that can be shared with law enforcement agencies for people that are undergoing a mental health crisis. And they did establish an opioid sub-cabinet within the executive branch. They made some changes to chemical dependency training and education, and they extended the amount of time that a homeless person or family can stay in transitional housing from 24 to 36 months. There will be a very detailed list within the micro report when we do that with the other items, but that's kind of a sample. So what didn't happen? Again, anything other than the mental health issues that I mentioned did not happen because they cost money, including the priority for Sherburne County, which was led by Sherburne County, and that was the county cost share relative to the mentally ill and dangerous. That was something that has a lot of support within the legislature. Senator Benson introduced it in the Senate, Representative Wolgamott in the House. It was heard in both bodies, laid over for possible inclusion, but again, because of the cost, was not included. next year's the budget year, we will go back and try to get that again, because that just seems to be something that is just, everyone's very, very cognizant of the fact that counties should not be paying for folks that, when we don't have any ability to move them to another facility. In terms, I just want to go back one more time to the budget bill, just what the differences were. The Senate's original target, spending target, was $1 billion, whereas the House's was $3 billion. In the end, with what the leadership agreed to, they agreed to $1 billion in funding. And so the Senate wanted to spend it largely on workforce, long-term care workforce issues, people that work in nursing homes, home care providers, PCAs, adult daycare treatment, non-emergency medical transportation rates, things like that. The House, again, wanted to spend more, and so they, in addition to long-term care, wanted to invest in childcare, homelessness. They had $100 million in proposals in public health, and so they wanted to do, other things. And again, none of this got worked out, but wanted you to hear a sample of where those two bills are, or where they entered conference committee. The last thing I just want to mention is the Child Protection Task Force is starting up again. This is a task force that was originally created in 2015 as a result of a child that was killed at the hands of his provider, or his parent. I think it was a stepmom. And they created this task force to try and come up with some regulations, et cetera. There are new chairs. Obviously, they've met once just to organize. The chairs are Representative Dave Pinto from St. Paul and Senator Mark Johnson from East Grand Forks. And they had this introductory meeting during session. They indicate that they're going to meet monthly during the interim, and the first thing they're going to do is look at the 93 recommendations that came out of that original report. So more to come on that. I just want to mention that will be there. Finally, I too want to call out some of your staff that I work very closely with: Amanda Larson, Jody Hiring, Nicole Ruhoff. All represent you so well and are a phone call away all of the time. They just really represent not just you, but counties as a whole, and I just want to mention that. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? I have one. The mental health course, was that it for kids? Was that involved with the school?
I think
bill, and so that got lost also.
Madam Chair, no. They did pass that adult mental health bill, which did include school-linked mental health.
Okay.
It was a standalone bill that the Senate kind of had this package.
Also. So.
Yeah, everybody agreed that mental health was the one thing that they really wanted to invest in, and so it kind of pulled away and was moving on its own, and components of it were in the House side, but the Senate had a standalone bill, and in the end, they put that package of mental health stuff together.
Oh, that's good. Thank you.
One little victory.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you.
So, Madam Chair and board members, just in the interest of time, I will breeze through. I'm going to pause on. There's a lot of overlap on the opioid competency restoration data sharing between corrections and public safety. So Nancy and Health and Human Services, Nancy has covered that. I did mention community corrections. We are well aware that is a top priority for counties. And I just, this is a significantly underfunded state mandate work that counties do to supervise state felons and state caseload, and inequitable distribution across the state. That really was a part of the solution that counties had brought forward this session as well, particularly for fast-growing counties like Sherburne County. The existing law formulas are disadvantageous to the distribution and allocation of the work that you do. So we are hopeful that if there is a special session, that'll be part of the package, and if not, we'll carry that conversation forward into 2023. There were some other things that were also part of the conversation, as you see on the list. Another general government, we mentioned the frontline workers. Steve mentioned the King report. I just want to highlight that. The King report refers to Deputy Registrar fee changes. Rick King had done a study at the request of the legislature last year that was put into law. The report came back this year that did recommend some fee increases and revenue sharing with the state in order for deputy registrars, which oftentimes county licensing centers offer those services, that would have made those much more financially sustainable. That was poised to happen and did not, along with everything else in the transportation public safety area, did not happen. I want to call out because I think it's an area that we also helped collaborate and lead with other partners to get significant increase on the table for SCORE grants for the work that counties are required to do under waste management and recycling, particularly with the awareness that by 2030 there's increased recycling expectations in state law, so a mandate that you're expected to meet and increase your recycling rates to. But yet less than 20% of the solid waste management tax revenues, which are essentially a user fee, go back to counties, which is the only level of government that's actually held accountable for reaching recycling goals. And so we have been raising that concern with the legislature. There was going to be about a 15 to 20% increase in those SCORE grants, was actually tentatively agreed to in the Environment Committee and in the tax bill in two parts. And so that just didn't get over the finish line, but was well positioned. So there was a number of questions, Commissioner Smeezing, Commissioner Dolan, others just sort of, where does this leave us and how did this sort of not get done and what's the politics of it? And so just to highlight a couple things on these last two slides, with what didn't happen, there's still, so this is sort of where does it leave the state budget? There's $7 billion on the state's bottom line in balance. That's in addition to about $3.5 billion in total reserves. So there's about 20% of the state biennial budget, which is unheard of in reserves and projected balance. Going forward, even if the bonding bill, the tax bill, all of the supplemental bills passed, there would still have been, there was a planned $4.2 billion that would have been left on the bottom line, plus about $3.5 billion in total budget reserves, which would have been about 13% of the biennial budget. It would have left the state's budget projections and reserves in a very healthy position, even if everything within the sort of global agreement of targets had been passed. So that's where we're left. In the absence of a special session, you can anticipate that would sort of be the lay of the land headed into the 2023 session, which begins at noon on June 3rd of 2023. Barring anything else, and what I put in there, just the questions that came along earlier, how much change, this starts to give a flavor for how much change we can expect just from retirements and open seats without the voters even having weighed in yet. There will be at least 23 of 67 new members to the Senate, and at least 44 of 134 representative districts will be new state representatives. So a third easily after the voters weigh in, likely a larger percentage of that. So to the questions, a significant learning curve and new set of members to work through these county issues going forward. Happy to answer any additional questions that you have.
Thanks, Matt.
Anyone have any questions? Felix, do you have any questions? Okay.
No, I don't. I'd just like to I think Micah does a great job for the counties it represents, and they really do tailor their service to our individual needs on a lot of occasions. So I just would like to thank them for all of their work and recognize that they're doing a great job for us. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you all. Thank you, Bruce Messelt, for his great work throughout the year. We rely on your administrators a lot and appreciate your membership. Thank you for having us up.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we are number 7, recess the regular meeting and then for 15 minutes. Should we
Yeah,
take a break? or
I think
not?
if we do a 10-minute break, we'll be back on time, if that's okay with everybody.
Okay, 10-minute break? Okay, we'll be back then at 10:10. We'll go ahead and reconvene our regular meeting and start with 8.1, which is to consider approval of final standard plat of Pinecrest Estates, West Sand Dunes properties in Minnesota with Lynn. Good morning.
Good morning, Board Chair and Commissioners. These are the items from the May Planning Commission meeting. Pinecrest Estates West, 23 lots. This is in the General Rural District on 71 acres in Orrock Township. Planning Commission recommended approval of the final plat with the 14 conditions. I did speak with the county attorney, and he recommended that number 6, that we change it to state the developer shall enter into a developer's agreement as approved by, and strike out with, the county attorney's office to ensure all conditions of the plat are met. If we could make that change, please.
So we can ask for consideration of approval for the final plat with that one change.
Madam Chair, I'll move approval with that change in condition of item 6 as asked for.
Okay, is there a motion's been made? Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any motion's been made and seconded? Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll go ahead with the vote.
Commissioner Dolan?
Aye.
Commissioner Danielowski?
Aye.
Commissioner Phobie?
Aye.
Commissioner Schmiesing?
Aye.
Commissioner Brandt?
Aye.
Passes 5-0.
Okay. So now we can go on to the next one, item number .2. Consider and approve the interim use permit amendment for CEF Haven Community Solar LLC.
Yes, and they're requesting to amend line 13 of their IUP to allow planting of a mix of species and allow 4-foot tall trees and to change the spacing. They did receive a variance to reduce the tree size. Planning Commission recommended approval of the IUP with the 21 conditions total and the findings of fact with the change to condition number 13.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve that request?
I'll move approval.
Is there a second?
I'll second, Madam Chair.
Okay. Motion's been made and seconded. Can we have any discussion? Seeing none, we'll go ahead with the vote.
Commissioner Dolan?
Aye.
Commissioner Danielowski?
Aye.
Commissioner Phobie?
Aye.
Commissioner Schmiesing?
Aye.
Commissioner Brandt?
Aye.
Passes 5-0.
Okay, now we can go on to item 8.3, which is to consider and approve conditional use permit for personal storage structure.
And this is in Palmer Township on .28 acres for Michael Gibbons. And this is in the Shoreline Overlay District of Briggs Lake and Rush Lake. Planning Commission recommended approval for the personal storage structure with the 6 conditions and the findings of fact.
Anyone like to make a motion?
Madam Chair, I'll move approval with the conditions outlined and findings of fact.
Is there, motion's been made, is there a second?
Madam Chair, I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded, is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll go ahead with the vote.
Commissioner Dolan?
Aye.
Commissioner Danielowski?
Aye.
Commissioner Phobie?
Aye.
Commissioner Schmiesing?
Aye.
Commissioner Brandt?
Aye.
Passes 5-0.
Okay, now we can move on to 8.4. Consider and approve an interim use permit for a 1 MW solar farm from Golly G Solar LLC.
And the reason why you have so many parcel ID numbers on this one's unusual in that they'll have the solar farm, but then there's I think it's about 1,000 feet long, under the ground is where the utility lines are going, and then they're coming up on a farmer's property, on the Imholt property, and that's where you'll see the 3 power poles. So that's why you have so many parcel ID numbers on there. This is in Clear Lake Township in the Ag District. Planning Commission recommended approval of the IUP with the 19 conditions and the findings of fact in your packet.
Okay, would anyone?
Madam Chair, I'll move approval.
Okay, motion's been made to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve this request. Is there any discussion?
Not discussion, I just have to comment on the name, Golly Gee.
And the property owner's last name is actually Golly.
That is great. I love the way they pull it together.
Gee,
Seeing no, is there further discussion? Seeing none, we'll go ahead with the vote.
Commissioner Dolan,
Aye.
Commissioner Danielowski,
Aye.
Commissioner Phobie,
Aye.
Commissioner Schmiesing,
aye.
Commissioner Brandt.
Aye.
Passes 5-0.
We can keep the jokes to a minimum. Laughing still hurts.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay, now we'd like to move on to 8.5, which is to consider and approve an interim use permit for a large contractor's yard, Leasing Express LLC.
And this is up in Haven Township on 9.16 acres in the industrial district. Planning Commission recommended approval with the 10 conditions and the finding of fact.
Anyone like to make a motion to approve?
Madam Chair, I'll make that motion for that approval.
Motion's been made, is there a second?
I'll second.
A motion's been made and seconded to approve this motion. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll go ahead with the vote.
Commissioner Dolan,
Aye.
Commissioner Danielowski,
Aye.
Commissioner Phobie,
Aye.
Commissioner Schmiesing,
Aye.
Commissioner Brandt.
Aye.
Passes 5-0.
Okay. And we move on to 8.6, which is to consider and approve a conditional use permit for single-family housing.
And the reason for this is because it's located in the industrial district. It's an existing house. Leasing Express is the applicant. Property owners are Jerome and Janet House. Again, this is in Haven Township on the same parcel. Planning Commission recommended approval with the 2 conditions and the findings of fact.
Would anyone like to make a motion to approve?
I'll move approval.
Motion's been made to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I'll
Madam
second,
Chair.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead and give it to Felix.
Okay, thank you. Motion's been made and seconded to approve this motion. Is there discussion? Seeing none, we'll go ahead with the vote.
Commissioner Dolan,
Aye.
Commissioner Danielowski,
Aye.
Commissioner Phobie,
Aye.
Commissioner Schmiesing,
Aye.
Commissioner Brandt.
Aye.
Passes 5-0.
Excuse
Okay,
me,
now
just to
we'll
be
move on
clear,
8.9.
Rand, you said that Commissioner Schmiesing could have the second. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move
Thank
on
you.
to item 8.7, which is consider approval of transfers from unallocated recorders compliance fund to various departments of 2023 budget year.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, good morning.
Good morning.
So I'm here for our annual request that we bring forward. Again, so a portion of recording fees goes into a fund, and as long as the recorder's office is compliant in returning their documents on time, those funds become available for other offices to use for data integration and aggregation projects. Each year we meet, and the committee comes together and considers requests, and you have in front of you a summary of this year's requests. Any questions?
Would anyone like to approve it for transfers?
I'll move approval.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, who's,
Give Lisa.
go ahead. Is there a second here?
Sure.
Yeah, okay. Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those, we'll go ahead with them.
Commissioner Dolan,
Aye.
Commissioner Danielowski,
Aye.
Commissioner Phobie,
Aye.
Commissioner Schmiesing,
Aye.
Commissioner Brandt.
Aye.
Passes 5-0.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Michelle.
Okay, thank you. Yes. Okay, go on to item number 8.8. Hello, to request for board approval to amend its 2022 staffing complement from an existing .5 FTE to propose 1.0 FTE Parks Maintenance Technician position. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I'm here to request amending our 2022 budget request for a half-time position, increasing it to a full-time position for parks maintenance. This position is needed to fulfill the general maintenance needs of the park system and the labor associated with the park improvement and trail construction projects that we've been doing through state and federal grants. This position would also perform the natural resource management associated with sustaining the native plant communities. Could you hear anything, or do you want me to start
Yes,
over?
we could hear
Okay. Sorry about that. This position would also fulfill the natural resource management activities associated with sustaining the native plant communities that characterize our park system. Much of the work is currently being performed by our streets maintenance crew. In 2021, the time invested in park projects exceeded a half-time position. As of May 21st in 2022, the streets maintenance crew is working at a rate equivalent to a full-time position. Seeing this increased rate in our analysis of hours in the parks, we believe it's important to increase this half-time position to a full-time position now as we're moving into the last half of 2022, so that we have a full-time staff fully trained into the 2023 year as we're looking at doubling our acres of parkland. Since we're already in June, the amount that we budgeted for a half-time position is enough to fully fund a full-time position for the remainder of 2022.
Okay, would anyone like to make a motion?
Madam Chair, I'll move approval.
Motion's been made to approve the addition of a full-time parks maintenance and natural resource technician. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, I just want to say we as a board, we've invested a lot of money in our parks and they look great. And I think it's important that we have the staff to maintain them and keep them looking great. It seems kind of foolish to invest money and then offload the duties of keeping them up to a different set of people. So I think this is a move in the right direction. It's just the natural maturity of our park system. So.
Any other discussion? Go ahead.
No questions. I just agree with Commissioner Dolan's comments, and I think that we have, we're being stretched with our parks, and we have committed to supporting parks as a county, and we're at a size that we, and people consider them just a great resource. If you look at any surveys that go out, some of the number one, and most of them is parks and trails. They want parks and trails, and if you don't maintain them, then I think you will find much more vandalism and people taking advantage of them. So I think it's important that we support this.
Anyone else? Okay.
Just to note that, again, we want to be transparent. While we can cover this year with the current budget, this is a build into next year's budget. However, in Dan's and my assessment of a lot of departments, we are looking at cost avoidance so that, there may be some investments that actually, by doing so, we avoid. In this particular case, Andrew and Marlon have already made it clear that their resources are taxed within the Public Works Department. So therefore, adding the parks position, we do believe we'll be freeing up some time for parks maintenance or for street maintenance and street operations. So hopefully the pressure to add staffing and resources there will be reduced. So I won't say this is a zero sum, but it's a realignment of staffing and resources, and Andrew's going to just highlight that for you because obviously I messed it up.
Not at all. Thank you so much. Good morning, County Board. Just to add a little bit to that, we do have a number of contracts currently that we enter into with our park system for maintenance. whether that be mowing or some other types of weed spraying and things like that, which this position would be able to take on and reduce those outside vendor costs. So again, it wouldn't be a net zero, but it helps work towards that cost of the employee.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll go ahead with the vote.
Commissioner Dolan?
Aye.
Commissioner Danielowski?
Aye.
Commissioner Phobie?
Aye.
Commissioner Schmiesing?
Aye.
Commissioner Brandt?
Aye.
Passes 5-0.
Okay, motion passed.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thanks, Gina.
Okay, we'll now move on to item 8.9. Amanda Larson to accept HHS grant awards and authorize execution of necessary grant agreement contracts. Welcome.
Hi, good morning, Commissioners. A few weeks ago, we got some exciting news in a one-week time frame that we were awarded a little over $500,000 for some existing programs, so that's always nice. So just wanted to briefly let you know about both of those. So first of all, you know that we had an addition to a housing outreach specialist this past year. Again, that is primarily a grant-funded position through the Community Living Infrastructure Grant. When I came to this board to talk about sustainability, really at that time, and continues to be highly in grants. The state is investing a lot of resources right now in housing, and there's more money at the state for those housing. So there's another round of these community living infrastructure grants. We submitted and was awarded $240,289 for a period of 2 years. Our current housing outreach specialist has more than one FTE of time. We knew that going into this, but we thought doing something was better than doing nothing. The grant that was awarded stipulates that we will need to hire another FTE to fulfill the requirements of the grant. Also, this grant provides direct assistance to clients. We don't currently use levy dollars to provide things like first and last month's rent, security deposits, some utility shutoff to really do some prevention strategies from keeping people out of crisis and housing instability. We wrote a Blue Cross Blue Shield grant, and those dollars have just run out at a time where now we have additional dollars through this grant to provide some of those. Our current housing outreach specialist will be doing a lot of case management activities, and this new FTE will be directed to do outreach and landlord engagement. So again, trying to provide some financial assurances to people who may not have the best credit or rental history in order to get those landlords to rent to those individuals. So. The next grant that we were awarded is for family group decision-making. If you aren't aware, family group decision-making is really a core prevention strategy that Health and Human Services uses to keep kids at home. We really use it to codify familial and community safety networks in order to prevent out-of-home placements, and also it lessens the need for government interference and intervention by really putting the decision-making with the family and the community support system. A good example of this is, I won't say 100%, but I've yet to see a family group decision-making where parental substance use isn't a cause that brought that referral to the meeting. And so in that instance, depending on the severity of the parental drug use, children are often removed from the home. That's a significant cost to county tax dollars. And so if we use this as a primary intervention strategy, then the goal is to create a safety plan that community supports and families can agree to, that can hold the parents responsible for, and then again, keep kids in the home, lessening taxpayer dollars, but also, more importantly, reducing trauma in those kids. This, like I said, has been a core prevention strategy in Sherburne County for 20 years. The funding has really fluctuated during that time. We do have a 1 FTE dedicated for family group decision-making. Because the funding from the state has fluctuated and it's been in place for over 2 decades, right now I think we get about $40,000 from the state. So by writing this grant, we were one of 7 counties that were awarded this grant, and so it's $324,000, $928 for a 2-year period of time with a possible extension for another 5 years. So there's no FTE request. Really, we're just happy to be able to fund, fully fund the current FTE that's in this position. So with that, I'm asking for your approval on accepting these 2 grant awards and then being able to execute them appropriately.
Thank you. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the 2 grants?
Madam Chair, I'll move approval.
Is there, a motion has been made to approve, is there a second?
Madam Chair, I'll second that.
Okay, motion's been made to approve and second to this request. Is there any discussion?
Sounds like a win to me.
It's all good.
Seeing any more discussion? Okay, seeing none, then we'll go ahead with the vote.
Commissioner Dolan?
Aye.
Commissioner Danielowski?
Aye.
Commissioner Phobie?
Aye.
Commissioner Schmiesing?
Aye.
Commissioner Brandt?
Aye.
Passes 5-0.
Motion's passed.
Madam Chair,
Congratulations, then
I
thank
just
you
had
for
one
all
more-
your hard work.
Yeah, I just wanted to say as well, I know that writing these grants is very intensive and a lot of energy and time goes into them. And just want to thank you and your staff for putting that effort into getting these grants. They definitely are a savings.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, now we'll go on with item number 8.10, to consider and approve resolution number 60722 AD 3022 to establish the absentee ballot board and UOCAVA absentee ballot board for the 2022 election year. And we have Diane here. Thank
Good
you.
morning, Commissioners, Madam Chairman. Yes, before you is a resolution to consider the establishment for the 2022 absentee ballot board and the UOCAVA, which is the Uniformed and Overseas Citizens Voting Act absentee ballot board for the 2022 primary and general election. This is required by Minnesota Statutes 203B.121, subdivision 1, and this is in regards to establishing the absentee ballot board and the UOCAVA absentee ballot board for the processing and accepting or rejecting of the 2022 absentee ballots in Sherburne County. This board will bring uniformity in the task of processing, accepting, or rejecting return absentee ballots in Sherburne County, as we have done with all the other state and federal elections in Sherburne County. So the absentee ballot board will consist of a sufficient number of election judges as provided in sections 204B.19 to 204B.22, or a deputy county auditor trained in the processing and counting of absentee ballots. This has been reviewed by our county attorney. That was on May 31st. I've neglected to put that part on here, but the resolution was reviewed by them. And I also have this budgeted in my 2022 budget.
Okay. Can we have a motion to approve this request?
I'll move approval of the resolution.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded to approve this request. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll go ahead with the vote.
Commissioner Dolan?
Aye.
Commissioner Danielowski?
Aye.
Commissioner Phobie?
Aye.
Commissioner Schmiesing?
Aye.
Commissioner Brandt?
Aye.
Passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Diane.
Okay, so now we'll move on to item 8.11, to consider American Rescue Act, ARPA, update and recommended approvals and expenditures. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. This week, we just have 3 biweekly expenditures under the $50,000 threshold for a total of $67,511.
Pocket change.
So,
Is that a motion, Commissioner?
That is a motion.
so
Move
this is
approval.
a motion's been made to approve the biweekly ARPA-related expenditures?
Correct. Thank you.
And the other piece of second, will be a second. The two
Madam-
on here will be separate.
We just have one this week. We don't have any expenditures over
there's
the
no
50,000
standalones.
threshold.
Okay, so there's just the
Just the one motion this week.
biweekly expenditures, okay.
Madam
Motion
Chair, I'll second that.
made and seconded to approve this request. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll go ahead with the vote.
Commissioner Dolan?
Aye.
Commissioner Danielowski?
Aye.
Commissioner Phobie?
Aye.
Commissioner Schmiesing?
Aye.
Commissioner Brandt?
Aye.
Passes 5-0.
Thank
Okay.
you. Then we'll have a little longer discussion in the workshop today about ARPA. So thank you.
Okay. So now we can move on to item 11.1, which
Item 9, which is Commissioner correspondence, committee reports, upcoming meetings, and future agenda items.
So go ahead with Commissioner correspondence from May 18th through June 6th.
I'll go ahead and say I don't remember most of that time period, so I'll have to get back to you.
Considering your health situation, we'll let you be the pass on
I
that.
was not able to attend any meetings from my hospital room.
All right, I can go next.
Yes.
May 17th, attended the law library meeting. Also, same day had a Central Minnesota River Partnership Transportation Subcommittee meeting. May 18th, had the SUP Coalition meeting. May 23rd, attended the Options Board meeting. May 25th, attended a council workshop in the city of Big Lake. May 30th, I also attended the Veterans Memorial Service. There was 2 services that day, and I was able to attend both of them, one for the Veterans Memorial with the recognition of the addition of names, and also the one that service that was at the cemetery, and because of the rain, was moved to the Lions Park because Sherburne, Big Lake has one of the longest living Gold Star mothers. She's 103 and a half, and she was attending, but she requested that she would not have to be out in the rain, so then they moved it from the cemetery to the Lions Park, and it was a very good ceremony. And then June 6th, met with staff at the city and also had a One Watershed, One Plan Zoom meeting. And in regards to SUP, I was also able to go with Roxanne Schrader to the Lake Liquor in Big Lake and out to the Sand Dunes Liquor, and we did a shock sticker event, and that was really cool to be able to put that information out there so people hopefully will understand that we in Sherburne County, most of the communities have social host ordinances, and because it's around the time for celebrating graduations and such, that just wanted to bring that awareness. So that was a pretty cool thing to be a part of. That did it for me.
Okay, I mentioned earlier our trip out to Washington. We had good visits with our delegation and a few of the other offices. Still participating in the NACO leadership course. Independent but connected, Central Minnesota Mental Health Center. We had a ribbon cutting for our new building that expands services for crisis and for detox. So that's really exciting. I had an East Central Regional Juvenile Center meeting, a Princeton Airport meeting, and also participated in the AMC end of the session webinar.
Felix, are you?
Yep, I can go quickly here. I was in Washington along with Lisa. I attended the Violent Offenders Task Force meeting, and I also covered the SEDS meeting for Sherburne County. You're getting pretty deep on the bench when you go down to me to cover that. But at any rate, I covered that. And I'm wondering about this liquor tour. Maybe you'll have to give us more later. I didn't quite understand what you were doing there. Thank you.
I was going to say the same thing, so that'd be good to more background. I forgot my calendar at home, so I'm sorry I have to call in with my items. Okay, so we can adjourn our regular meeting. And we're going into a recess. How long should we make it? We're a little ahead of time, so.
I mean, I guess it's up to the board if you want to follow through, but maybe take 5 minutes here. Just, we do have to do the workshop in this room so that Felix can participate.
Yeah.
So if we just take 5 minutes.
Madam Chair,
Yes?
I am going to step away from this meeting. I have some other events that I have to be at. So I'll be, when you adjourn the meeting, I'm leaving. So if you want to go into the conference room to have your workshop, it won't affect me. So, okay?
Good to see you,
Thank you.
Felix. Thank you.
Have a good day,
Thank you, have
Felix.
fun.
Good to see you. Thank you. Bye now.
So if we're going to go to the workshop room, still maybe 5 minutes just to get everybody set up.
Okay, so it is 10:39 now, so 5 minutes from now will be 10:44.
10:45, yeah.
10:45, okay.